I'm going to read out this article that was published in Info Vaticana. It's one of the largest Spanish-speaking Catholic news services. So I've done the Google Translate on it and it translates fine. But I'm just going to read you out. It's only 6 minutes. I thought it was interesting, and then I just wanted to do one commentary on it. One thing I just want to say before I comment on it. A lot of people get annoyed with Catholic bloggers if we say anything or question anything about what Pope Francis says. But there exists no dogma or teaching in the church that says laity needs to take a vow of silence about what the Pope does. You know, there is this ability to politely, charitably question what the Pope does and says. We are entitled to do these things, and we can do them in a spirit of love for the church, unity in the church. But again, it's not being uncharitable to question what is going on in the church, and we have valid reasons to be asking what is going on. So anyway, I'm going to read this out for you. Pope Francis and his climate church. From COVID to climate change, the same socio-environmental crisis. 8th of February 2025 by Jaime Urgurpegui. If something has characterized Francis' pontificate, it is his insistence on mixing everything in the same speech. In his latest biography, he does not disappoint. The pandemic, the climate crisis, poverty, exploitation, the dignity of the excluded, everything is presented as a single socio-environmental crisis, a global problem that requires a comprehensive response, because apparently the spread of COVID and the destruction of ecosystems are the same phenomenon. According to Pope Francis, the scientific community has already shown that in degraded habitats there are more viruses that can infect humans. There is no environmental and social crisis, but a single and complex crisis that leads to health tragedies. Thus, the COVID pandemic was not just a health crisis, but one more consequence of exploitation of nature, the wild anthropization of lack of respect for biodiversity. In this story, the pandemic is not the responsibility of a communist regime that hid information or a leak from a lab, nor the manipulation of biosecurity laboratories, nor of incompetence of governments that applied erratic and totalitarian measures. No, the fault is the environmental degradation and the development model that does not respect the planet. COVID was not an epidemiological problem, but another symptom of the climate crisis. A church at the service of the new green religion. This speech is not new. Pope Francis has been promoting the idea for years that ecology is a theological issue, that caring for the environment is part of the church's mission. In Laudato Si, he already established the foundations of his climate theology, where sin is not only moral, but also ecological. Now, in his biography, he doubles the bet. The pandemic was a warning that we must act urgently to save the planet. It is no coincidence that the Church of Francis speaks more of climate change than of sin, more of ecology than of conversion, more of CO2 emissions than of salvation. The climate crisis has been integrated into the Catholic message as if it were an essential part of faith, to the point that ecology has become the new morality. But the underlying problem is even more serious. When the Church adopts the globalist narrative of interconnected crisis, it ceases to be a moral beacon and becomes an NGO at the service of the agenda of the moment. When climate change is placed at the centre of ecclesial discourse, faith is subordinated to politics. Pope Francis concludes that the pandemic taught us that we have the means to face global challenges and that we will be more resilient if we do it together. And what does this mean in practice? It means accepting the global governance model that was imposed with COVID. Massive restrictions, social controls, limitation of individual freedoms in the name of common good. The pandemic showed that under the pretext of a crisis, churches can be closed, sacraments suspended, the faithful can be isolated, and the church can be subjected without resistance to government decisions. Now, with the climate crisis as a new pretext, we seek to apply the same logic: restrictions, sacrifices, controls, all in the name of common responsibility. The most worrying thing is that Francis has assumed this speech without hesitation. Instead of being a critical voice in the face of excesses of global power, it has made the church one more speaker of the official narrative. Instead of denouncing the lies and manipulations that surrounded the pandemic, he insists that we must learn the lesson and act together in the face of global climate crisis. But the church is not called to be the UN's religious affairs department or to repeat the slogans of the World Economic Forum. The mission is to announce the truth of Christ, not to promote the climate agenda. The problem is not that the church talks about caring for the environment, but that it becomes its main message. It is not that Francis cares about ecology, but that he subordinates faith to the green ideology. It's not that the church wants a better world, but that it assumes without questioning the dogmas of global progressiveness. COVID passed, but the lesson learned by those who managed power is clear. If people accepted extreme restrictions in the name of health, they will also accept them in the name of the climate. And the question is, will the church continue to justify everything in the name of socio-environmental crisis? Everything indicates yes. I thought it was interesting that the Pope would bring up climate change and the pandemic and kind of mush them together. It's a very hard topic to talk about on YouTube because what I would like to discuss, you get censored. Everybody knows what happens when you get censored. So I can't really speak my mind on this topic on this platform. I might have to do a video on some other platform to really speak my mind. But I do remember during the so-called pandemic, and I call it so-called because the consensus is that it just didn't appear out of nowhere. And Biden's pardon of Fauci at the end of his presidency doesn't really bode well for Fauci and his funding of a certain place in a certain country where this so-called virus came from. But anyway, I remember during the whole COVID era debating, do I get this treatment, do I not? Do I get this treatment, do I not? And at the end of the day, my conscience told me no. My conscience told me no. Now, if you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, conscience is mentioned over 50 times. It's well developed out in Catholic teaching. Conscience is a judgment of reason whereby the human person recognizes the moral quality of a concrete act that he is going to perform. In the process of performing, or has already completed. In all he says and does, man is obliged to follow faithfully what he believes to be right and just. It is by judgment of his conscience that man perceives and recognizes the prescriptions of divine law. Conscience is a law of the mind, yet Christians would not grant that it is nothing more. I mean that it is not a dictate, nor conveyed the notion of responsibility, of duty, of a threat or a promise. Conscience is a messenger of him whom both in nature and in grace speaks to us behind the veil and teaches and rules us by his representatives. Conscience is the aboriginal vicar of Christ, and that is from Cardinal Newman. But you can, if you go to the Catechism and you go from 1776 onwards, you have a whole chapter on moral conscience, right? So, and you can actually take the, this whole part of the dignity of the human person and expand it out in a whole course on itself. Do you know what I mean? It's so deep, it is so rich. Conscience and formation of conscience. I remember we discussed it a lot in Rome when I was there. And I remember during the pandemic, there was so much being shoved at us and on media to take this thing, this thing that you can't talk about on social media because there's only one narrative allowed. And my wife, her mother was ill at the time, and she wanted to go to Poland, and so in order for her to travel, you needed this green cert, this European, this totalitarian green cert that allowed you to travel. You either took the thing or took a test. Anyway, she went off and got it and got extremely ill after it. And that's a statement of fact. That's not an opinion. And afterwards, she wouldn't let me or anybody else in our family take it. My sister-in-law wouldn't take it. Others in our family wouldn't take it. Some of them got some of it, and then they got my brother as well, got the first thing of it, and then he wouldn't take it either. And I'm just relaying, this is not a debate on the thing for this platform to censor. That's just relating historical facts that happened a few years ago that people don't want to talk about or even debate anymore. And so when I saw Pope Francis meeting with the people that developed this, that made billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars on it, billions of dollars, the wealth that was generated from this thing. When I saw him giving space in the Vatican for it to be administered, alarm bells started ringing. Apart from the fact that it had been tested on HEK cells, HEK cells from aborted fetuses that we know of. Okay, this is not conspiracy that I'm talking about. These are cell lines that are reproduced over many times. So it's a remote connection to abortion, and there's been all of the debate around this. But still, could we not have medical treatments that weren't tested on HEK cells? However, the remote connection to abortion wasn't really what concerned me so much. It was just the logic that was going through my mind that, okay, what would be the consequences of this in 20, 30 years, or what are the long-term consequences? And in the media, we couldn't really get access to much data, and you were seeing so many people getting censored. Well, I say, how can we have a good, balanced dialogue of ideas here when, okay, there's only one narrative allowed? It's like a dictatorship when only one narrative is allowed. Now, we have seen since Biden dictatorship has disappeared. We have seen since the Biden dictatorship, the puppet dictatorship really has disappeared, that Zuckerberg has come out, that Musk obviously has come out. We haven't seen Alphabet come out, Google come out yet, but we have certainly seen Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan speak about how they were told to take down content. So I'm just relating what the big billionaires that control social media have been saying. We were told to take down content. We were told there was only one voice allowed. And when Pope Francis fired, or the Vatican fired 3 Swiss guards because they, in good conscience, practicing Catholics, in good conscience, didn't want to take the so-called thing, and they were let go, it was a turning point for me. It really was a turning point for me, because you might as well just dump this in the bin. Dump it in the bin. Don't come to us about moral conscience. Dump it in the bin. There exists no conscience anymore for people to follow. Where was the ability for Catholics to defend themselves? And Italy was ruthless when it came to imposing their regime. You were fined, you were harassed, yada, 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 until you took it. Now, in the midst of this, it should be up to the church to give guidance, but not to weigh in behind a regime. It's like they were the religious affairs of the WHO. The Catholic Church became the religious affairs of the WHO. The Catholic Church became the greatest advertiser for Big Pharma. Instead of giving guidelines and allowing people to make informed decisions according to their conscience, it became part of the regime. It really did. And I know this is a difficult video for me to make, but this is why I kind of really got shocked to what the Holy Father was doing. What is the mission of the church? It is salvation of souls. It really is. We are here to help souls to gain union with God. We're not here to prop up Big Pharma. You know, if the church accomplished its mission, we would be other Christs, poor like Christ, live like Christ. The world would be transformed. This consumerism, this everything that Pope Francis doesn't like, it would fall into place if the church did its mission. The left and the right in the church, they both care for the poor. There's no doubt about it. Pope Francis cares for the poor. He wants to reach those that are lost and so forth. But he is failing in the mission in really by bringing together the church to accomplish its mission. Because if we were other Christs, if we were other Christs, if the church was accomplishing its mission, there would not be poor. There would not be poor. We would raise up a standard of living beyond anything that we could imagine. Because union with God, it transforms lives, it transforms societies, it transforms families and so forth. I don't know. I would like to know people's comments on this. I get a lot of slack whenever I do a video on the Pope. The Pope Francis' supporters, they get very annoyed and angry if I do a video on the Pope. But I suppose when you've been formed by John Paul II, I would be John Paul II type of seminarian, studied Vatican II, would have been perfectly okay with the new Mass, with the liturgical forms. This is the way we were formed, and we were taught the catechism end to end, and what is the mission of the church. And now with Pope Francis, we really has upended in many ways. And the COVID era was the last straw. The COVID era was the last straw. It's interesting that it came after the enthronement of the Pachamama, which been carried through the Vatican and been danced around in the Vatican gardens, and this whole debate. Well, look, we're baptizing pagan images, and the Pantheon used to be a pagan temple, and now it's baptized. I don't know of any pagan statue that has been baptized as a Catholic image that we use today, but it's seemingly the Pachamama is something that you can do that. But I suppose the COVID era really woke me up. I think it's going to wake a lot of Catholics up, and so I'm challenging is out there. The priests, bishops, cardinals, the hierarchy of the church. What is the mission of the Catholic Church? Has the Catholic Church become the religious department of the WHO and the UN? And Bilderberg and George Soros and Davos and so forth? Or does it provide any direction? Or does it just take orders from all of these entities and then just pushes the agenda forward? I've nothing against caring for our our common environment. I grew up in a farm. I've nothing against good practices that protect our environment and our world, and ensures that, you know, we're not hurting developing parts of the world. However, you know, when we touch on immigration, which is a very hot topic at the moment, immigration is really the raping of developing countries. Because legal immigration is the raping of developing countries. We take their best talent, we bring it over to the first world. You know, what are people climbing up in developing? Instead of developing the developing countries, we're actually taking, oh yeah, we want legal immigration. We want their best doctors, their best engineers, their best this, their best that. It's the same in Ireland. We've become the Singapore of Europe. And so our economy needs the best of the best. And so, you know, we're the best of the best in Uganda. Well, as soon as they climb to the top of the ladder, they're gone. It's like our Irish doctors. The best of the Irish doctors don't bother staying in Ireland. They go elsewhere where they can get more money. You know, our policies, our immigration policies are not working globally. And, you know, we need to rethink things. But the church has one mission, and it is not to solve the world's problems. It is to lead souls to union with God. And when you are another Christ, you will act like Christ, how he acted and how he transformed societies, communities, countries, the world, how Christ, the greatest transformer there is. Because, you know, you will become poor like him and help others to live the Christian way. That's my thought in any way. But I give this love for the church to make you digest something, because bishops won't speak, cardinals won't speak, priests won't speak. But I know all of you are questioning it. I know the hierarchy and the bishops and all, because you all tell me. And, you know, that's why I'm giving this video in a spirit of love for the church. What is the mission of the Catholic Church? You know, if Pope Francis had been around when Al Gore was doing all of his stuff in the early 1990s and giving these dire predictions, or in the 1980s giving the dire predictions, because we've had loads of forecasts on climate change. You know, tons and tons and tons of forecasts on climate change. That you know, the world is going to get colder, it's going to get warmer, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. You know, at one stage Ireland was going to be a new ice age, and now we're going to be really warm. And, you know, there's been a whole thing about climate. There's been a whole debate about it. And what is this? Is the solution to this? You know, global cooperation. Does that mean global? Like in COVID, does that just mean a new dictatorship, global control? A couple of elite people tell the world what to do. You know, well, let's see what happens in this. And, you know, but I do think that we should have more ability to debate these issues openly, without censorship. I do think that is something that is absolutely needed, because, you know, free exchange of ideas is critical. And we didn't have free exchange of ideas during this pandemic. You know, anyway, God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye.